Hey everybody, Nathan Rich here again. A lot of people have been asking me to comment on Palestine and Israel, and even though these are not exactly my area of expertise, I thought maybe I should contribute a little bit to the conversation since this thing keeps going on and on. There's a lot to say about the conflict and everything going on. I think a good way to sort of enter the discussion is to talk about a video that I saw recently. I've been watching Piers Morgan and his interviews about this subject. He just recently released a video called "Israel Have a Track Record of Lying," in quotes. Piers Morgan and Owen Jones debate Palestine treatment. Before seeing this video, I had no idea who Owen Jones is. I know Piers Morgan a bit from his interviews in the past, and he's a bit famous. So I really didn't know what to expect going into this video. So let's take a look and see if there's anything interesting we can talk about.
Israel's spokespeople have a long track record of lying through the back teeth. When they shot in the head, for example, Shireen Abu Akleh, they said for months and months and months it was Palestinian gunmen. It wasn't. They shot her in the head. James Miller, a brilliant British documentary filmmaker, shot dead 2002 by the Israelis. Years later, of course, after they denied it.
You wouldn't believe Hamas and their version of events either, would you?
So Owen Jones says that Israel has a history of lying about killings and other events. And Piers says, well, you wouldn't believe Hamas about this, right? Now, from a historical research point of view, which is mostly what I do, looking into wars, there's never, I would say rarely ever, a complete consensus. The way that I approach this from a research point of view is I take both sides into consideration and assume that the truth is somewhere thereabouts. So it can be difficult. But this "you wouldn't believe Hamas" question, it almost sounds like he's saying we should believe Israel but not Hamas. The answer here really is that there should be some sort of third party, as neutral as possible, investigation to these types of things. Now they're talking about another interview which I didn't watch, so I don't really know what they're referring to. But anyway.
That's why I depend on what aid agencies the United Nations are saying on the ground, which is that collective punishment is being unleashed against the Palestinian people.
So here he says that we should depend on the UN and aid agencies. That's a good way to do it for the time being, rather than listening to one side of a conflict. If you look at the sort of Russia-Ukraine conflict, almost all of the news that we get is from Ukraine, and then whenever Russia gives us information, we usually say, Russia says this. So I think that's kind of not the best way to go about reporting or analyzing the ground events, to only listen to one side. But this Owen Jones guy, he's right. We should do the best we can, which is to leverage those more or less independent parties.
Is firstly because they cut off energy in a total siege, which they justified by saying they were fighting human animals, which should be considered genocidal rhetoric, has been condemned as such.
Well, it should certainly be condemned, and they should not have the ability, Israel, to cut off water and power and fuel.
So the next thing that they talk about is genocidal rhetoric, which I don't put that much stock into it. When you're at war, you're going to say a lot of bad things. So a comment, I don't know if that's what they're referring to, but if it's just a comment, it's more about actions in war rather than what people say. Now, what people say is important, but we would need to see more evidence of a genocide than just someone calling people animals, right? I mean, almost every war in history, that kind of rhetoric goes on. They seem to agree about this point. Piers says that he condemns it and he's against it.
It's collective punishment. Can we agree? Under Article 33, that's against the law. It's a war crime. Can we agree? I think we should have some consensus.
I would argue you're heading towards collective punishment when you do that.
You're not heading towards collective punishment when you cut off energy and water to the entire civilian population.
The thing I don't like about this particular exchange about turning the power off and sort of debating about if that's a war crime is that it sort of misses the broad point. A broad point that I almost never see really clearly spelled out on Piers's program or really anywhere else, which is that Hamas is not a country. In the context of states and governments and whatnot, they are a political party. Israel's not a political party, it's a country. Israel declared war on Hamas. It didn't declare war on Palestine. The broader, bigger point here that I hope Owen and other people like him will see is that a country has the right to declare war on anything it wants, but no matter what it's declared war on, it doesn't have the right to perform military operations inside the borders of another country unless it declares war on that country. Now, when I say right here, it doesn't mean moral ability. It doesn't mean right as in it's okay to do so. It means that by international norms and standards, you can't just invade countries without declaring a war on them. The issue is not that it shouldn't be able to declare war on Hamas or get revenge. To me, the issue is if you don't declare war on Palestine and you can't enter their space. Now, we can talk about occupation and all that kind of stuff, but if we reset history to the beginning of October and we look at the action since then, and this is one of the things I've noticed that Piers tends to do on his show, is sort of say, well, everything before that may have led up to it, but that's a big milestone and turning point. Okay, fine. Let's just say that everything that that Israel occupies in Palestine is completely legitimate and fine. Great, wonderful. Just concede all that immediately. Declaring war on Hamas doesn't allow you to enter Palestinian territory nor to take aggressive actions towards Palestine. You have to declare war against the country to invade it, and it hasn't done that. So forget about Article 33, okay? Every single action, in my opinion, that Israel takes against Palestinian citizens, cities, land, territory, all of those are completely illegal and you could say war crimes. So to me, that's a much bigger point than this Article 33 thing.
Take the issue of fuel. They want to try and get fuel in, the Israelis, as they've said, to the hospitals, to the humanitarian side of this, but they know that Hamas are taking that fuel and using it for their military.
So here Piers presents what he says is the Israeli view on why they are stopping supplies, and it's not adequate in my opinion, because it's sort of like saying, well, we shouldn't be dropping food into a starving area because people are taking that food and selling it. And the people who need it the most aren't getting that food. We want to send stuff to the hospitals, but when we do that, Hamas is taking it and using it against us, so we're not going to send it to the hospitals. Some of that could get through and save lives. There's a chance it could save lives, but there's also a chance, or even a high chance, that our enemies could get it, and so we're just not going to save those lives. So this is a conscious decision to say, those innocent people, we will definitely allow them zero chance to survive because there's some chance that it could be used by our enemies. And when you really sort of run the math on it, what they're actually saying at the end of the day is, we would rather those innocent people die than jeopardize the lives of our soldiers, which is a sort of a running theme in the way that this Israel-Hamas conflict has been going on. So I disagree with that logic completely. I think that you have to do your best to try to support citizens. I think that if you want to engage in a war that the international community can get behind, you have to treat citizens as very valuable and worthy of saving, as opposed to, well, if one citizen is saved, but one of our soldiers' lives is endangered, then it's not worth it. That's I don't think that the international community should be behind that.
Babies right now are gasping for breath and suffocating. We've had several nurses and patients shot dead. In fact, this whole hospital has been described by medical staff as a mortuary.
But you don't know.
Just quickly, when a hospital becomes a mass grave, when dozens of decomposing bodies have to be buried in a mass grave in a hospital.
So then Owen gets very descriptive about the state of the hospital and children suffocating and all these people dying in it, nurses and whatnot. And this is a relatively effective strategy. This is to raise awareness and emotion about what he's saying. It doesn't affect me in the way that it affects most people, I think, because I literally spend nearly every single day of my life researching war. So, you know, I understand very, very clearly what war is. So I'm not emotionally impacted by this in this sort of shocking way, but I do understand it, and it's necessary to talk like this sometimes to get people to understand what's meant by not giving fuel to generators and not giving supplies to hospitals, what that really means and what it looks like. So I think it's a good tactic that he's using here to sort of bring that into clarity. Like I said, I think a more intellectual way to discuss it is to really talk about what that decision really is, which is that we would rather let babies die than potentially endanger the lives of our soldiers. So that's really mathematically what the equation is that they've decided is how they want to go.
And I think this is very wise. You said in March 2022. I'm seeing a genocidal monster killing women and babies in maternity hospitals as we sit back and let him do it. Why was it so disgraceful? But you were right.
So now Owen brings up basically that Piers is so against Russia's invasion of Ukraine and sort of says, well, he's kind of pointing out this hypocrisy or hinting at this hypocrisy in Piers, and Piers is going to defend himself here. So let's listen to what he says.
The two are, in my opinion, morally very different. In one case, Vladimir Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine, he was committing war crimes, having illegally invaded wait a second, let me finish. Having invaded a sovereign democratic country.
We can talk about if Ukraine is democratic all day, but it's sort of irrelevant to what I want to mention here, which is that sovereign country is a very, very interesting subject when it comes to Israel, Palestine as well. As I will probably talk about in another video, Palestine is a country. It is recognized by the majority of UN countries as being a country. And yet, of course, when you look on Wikipedia, Taiwan, which has almost no recognition at all, is listed as a country, whereas Palestine is listed as a state. And the discussions on Wikipedia are not about if it should be called a country. No, it's about, is it even a state at all? So it's very interesting to hear him say that. If you ask Russia, it will talk about its need for self-defense and, protecting those citizens and ethnic minorities that had been allegedly genocided and all these other things. It's a complicated issue that, again, I'm not an expert on. But to me, it's sort of a weird comparison, these two conflicts, because they are dissimilar. But both of them involve an invasion of a foreign country. In the Israel-Palestine situation, Israel invaded Palestine. Again, with most of the conversation involving Piers, that all gets swept away into the past and everything sort of resets with October. And this is something that many of his guests have tried to get him to stop weaseling about, but it's very difficult with him. He's quite good at what he does.
The question of the hospitals is this to me. They have so far produced some evidence of Hamas operating inside the hospital. For me, so far, as a journalist trying to be fair and impartial, I don't think I've seen enough evidence here.
So this is another one of these topics that the way people talk about it is a bit weird to me, which is that Hamas using hospitals as operations grounds. I tweeted about this sarcastically the other day, and I got a bunch of scholars, as you do on Twitter or whatever it's called now, in my responses, not really getting my tweet. Now, admittedly, it's a bit dry humor, but all this talk about, well, Hamas is using the hospitals as military operation centers is just bizarre to me. It's such a weird thing to say because it's only in this context. In all of our humanity and history and the way that we view morality, it's only in this context where anyone would not immediately think that you're a lunatic for saying that. Now, let me explain. Imagine the police get a domestic violence call. They go to a home and they find a man holding his woman hostage. Do they think to themselves, well, this man is a danger. He has weapons. He's expressed intent to kill us or others or whatever, but he has hostage. He's using this human shield. So let's just burn the entire house down and kill both of them. If that happened, people would think that this was like the crime of crimes, like just murder. I mean, this would be a horrible, horrible thing to do. It makes absolutely no sense on a day-to-day situation that we should just kill them all because, hey, it's his fault. He was using his, significant other as a meat shield, so he shouldn't have done that. It doesn't make sense on any scale, right? Even larger. Right? It doesn't make any sense, and we all sort of recognize it now, that we just carpet bomb entire cities and kill everyone and nuke them, right? This is something that no country would stand behind today. We all basically recognize that you can't just kill all the innocent people because there's bad guys hiding in there too. And yet, only in this particular context, suddenly we go, well, there's Hamas in the hospital, so I guess everyone in the hospital just has to die. Makes perfect sense. It just is crazy to me that this is not immediately rejected as just outright, complete disregard for innocent lives in the way that it is in every single other size and context of our entire existence. It's only Hamas in hospitals that in any way justifies killing all the people in the hospital. I have no idea why this is even an argument.
You repeatedly denounced Putin for his genocidal behaviour in Ukraine. Do you stand by that? Do you think that's a genocide?
Absolutely.
Well, it doesn't matter what the basis for what the operation...
Of course it does.
No.
It does.
No, Piers, in terms of what actually is happening...
So here Owen is making a point that I'm not sure if people really catch clearly, which is that it doesn't matter why you're committing the genocide. It doesn't matter if it's justified in God's eyes. It still is a genocide. Now, again, I'm not necessarily agreeing with what he's saying, but this point is super, super important for people to understand. A war crime is a war crime. It doesn't matter, it's justified. A war crime is a war crime is a war crime.
Hamas, from its charter onwards, and from the spokesman said last week, is dedicated to the eradication of Israel and killing as many Jews as it can possibly kill. That is the purest definition of genocide intent that you will ever see, and they executed it on October the 7th as best they could.
So again, it's a lot of quick talking here and a lot of things that you could object to. I haven't read the Hamas charter because I don't really care, but assuming that everything that he just said is correct about how they explicitly want to erase Jews from the world, then yes, that's very genocidal rhetoric. That would also go to say that the massacre that they committed in October would qualify as a genocidal massacre. But that's not a genocide. It's weird the way he equates those two things. The Holocaust being a genocide is not because some Jews were killed. It's because it was a deliberate, strong attempt to actually do that. The massacre that happened in Israel was not an attempt to actually wipe out all Jewish people. You could describe it as a genocidal massacre, but that's just not the same thing as a genocide. The massacre was a horrible thing. It's still not genocide, even if the people committing it said that it was or that it was meant to be. It still isn't. It wasn't one.
These are very long questions.
They're not. I'm answering a point, and I'm putting one to you, right? In my estimation, they are qualitatively different. What Hamas is publicly what it's doing is genocide.
So I really like what Owen is doing here, where he's just kind of going, like, Piers, where's the question? And this is because Piers is quite opinionated, and he does sort of get into debates with people a lot rather than asking them questions, but he still calls it an interview and uses that on his side, where he'll say, I'm the one who's doing the interview, I'll ask the questions. But then he just sort of talks and talks and talks a lot. So I do appreciate that Owen is sort of badgering him to, like, when am I going to be able to talk? That's actually a pretty smart way to do it.
You could say both Israel and Hamas have engaged in genocidal and murderous rhetoric.
No.
And I'll give you an example.
No,
yes, they have.
No, you can't.
Benjamin Netanyahu.
No,
I can. Is it uncensored or not?
Yes. You can say
Let me quote.
This is a great part of the interview where Owen is saying that both sides have said genocidal rhetoric and whatnot, and Piers seems very upset by this and doesn't want to let him kind of make that point. And then Owen's like, is this uncensored or not? Like, he's like, I can't even talk here. You're just talking and talking and talking. Then you ask a question. Then as soon as I start to answer, you just start talking again. So I really thought this was extremely effective. And so Piers says, fine, go ahead and make your point. And let's listen to what he says.
Let me quote what the Israeli authorities have said.
Go on.
Benjamin Netanyahu, when he quoted Amalek, the scriptures, what does Amalek say? He quotes Amalek when they attacked the Israelites. And what God told the Israelites to do was to destroy kill every man, woman, child, and livestock. If, I would put it to you, an Islamist leader was quoting a similarly genocidal passage from the Quran, you would not, I would say, hesitate. Israeli officials said that Gaza will end up being a city of tents with no building standing. That they are attacking for damage, not for accuracy. The agricultural minister, Avi Dikti, he said we are rolling out a new Nakba. A Nakba is the mass expulsion, 700,000 Palestinians in 1948. This is why hundreds of genocide scholars, people who are actually, unlike you and I, experts in the field of genocide studies, fear that a genocide is taking place.
Okay, so Owen lays out a bunch of examples of ways that Israel officials have sort of expressed intent that could be, without much stretch, interpreted as genocidal rhetoric. I don't really have any issues with the ones that he's included here. They do seem pretty genocidal on their face, at least. And so I think that, yes, Hamas explicitly says these things. You could take that as genocidal rhetoric, of course, and you can take their massacre as a genocidal massacre. But like I said before, a genocidal massacre, as horrible as it is not the same thing as a genocide. It doesn't result in the disappearance of the entire population or the vast majority of the population of an ethnicity or culture. So there's a difference there. And I think that I don't really remember the rest of this interview, but I think what's going to come out is something along the lines of Israel has the actual power to do that to Palestine, whereas Hamas doesn't have the power to do that to Israel. So that doesn't justify either side doing any kind of war crimes at all. But it does tell you that there's a difference in the way that we should be viewing the potential for genocide between these two parties. And I think that that's what Owen's going to talk about here.
Right, so the difference between Israel and Hamas is Hamas does not have the capacity to wipe out Israel. Israel is wiping Gaza off the map. That's the point.
But you've actually exposed the weakness in your argument.
Yeah, so I guess I did remember that part correctly. He worded it in a brief way because it's live and they have to sort of be quick, but that is definitely something that the outside world needs to take into consideration. Obviously, if you're a family on either side and you're attacked, I mean, you don't care about all this blabbering. But from the international community's point of view, there's no possibility that Hamas is going to actually commit a genocide against Jews because they don't have the ability to do so. Even if they have the intent and even if they try, it's not something that actually can happen. Whereas the genocide of Palestinians is something that actually can happen. That's sort of the first thing that we need to understand about this genocide claims back and forth. And this is Piers's answer to that.
Israel does have the ability to kill everyone in Gaza tomorrow, and they're not doing it.
So Hamas committed genocide by committing a genocidal massacre. That's what he said earlier. But Israel, because they haven't completely wiped out Palestine yet, they're not committing a genocide and they have no intention to do so. This is a very, very bad argument. I think he's going to say some more, so we'll get to that. But Piers, the Nazis also didn't wipe out all the Jews. I don't even know what you think you just said, or maybe you misspoke, but there's no qualifier for genocide that literally every single member of that group has to be eradicated. The fact that Israel can commit genocide and the fact that Hamas can't is the primary starting point from this discussion. The fact that they can, and according to you haven't yet, that's not a point. That's a point against you, Piers. That's a point that we need to be extremely cautious about them committing genocide, much more so than we do with Hamas, who literally can't do it.
They are issuing a number of warnings repeatedly to people to go south, wait, and stay out of northern Gaza, right? And then they're pulverizing it with airstrikes, and now they've gone in on the ground, and they're waging battle with Hamas fighters, terrorists, right?
So first of all, in nearly every single war in modern history, leaflets and warnings are dropped and broadcast. There's no responsibility of citizens to flee when they get leaflets. There's no agreement that dropping leaflets therefore means that now you're allowed to bomb areas. It's completely illegal to bomb inside of Palestinian territory if you're in any other country, Israel included. That's completely illegal. It's also illegal to indiscriminately bomb places that you know have civilians and don't have Hamas soldiers there. I mean, the war on Hamas is completely illegal if it takes place inside of Palestine. I don't know how many times I can say this. It's everything that you've just said that they're doing that isn't a genocide is at the very least war crimes and has nothing at all to do with if it's a genocide or not.
No, hang on. So my point is this. Israel could, if they wanted to, kill everyone in Gaza. They decided not to do that.
Is your definition,
genocide is where you want to kill everyone.
Sorry.
Very weird way to look at this. Genocide is not where you want to kill everyone. Genocide is where you kill most of the people of that population. That's what genocide is, or a large body of them. So you can say that you know, it's a small-scale genocide, the massacre in October. You could maybe say that. It's still a stretch. Qualifying a genocide as killing every member or wanting to kill every member is a very weird way to describe things. It's not really how it works. You're a bit confusing motivation with the actual practice.
Vladimir Putin hasn't killed every last Ukrainian. That's simply not happened. No, he hasn't. And nor has he stated his intention to do so.
So Owen's response to this.